Welcome to another video in the TimCo Retail Manager course. In this video, we're going to lay out our plan for the next section of the project. This application is being planned out and built in sections for a few reasons. First, it will mimic what you might see in the real world, or at least what you probably should see. Second, it will allow us to get something in place and working quickly. And third, it will allow us to adjust more easily to situations as they come up. Currently, we have just wrapped up our first section of work. We created our shell of an application and configured our major pieces. Now it's time to move on to the next section. But before we do that, there's a couple of housekeeping things to cover. First, subscribe to this channel. Not only will you get great C# content at least twice a week, but you'll also be telling YouTube that you think this content is valuable. Second, take a second and hit the thumbs up button. That isn't just an encouragement to me. It's also a message to YouTube that you appreciate content like this. It takes 2 seconds, and yet it can literally make a massive difference. Finally, there are 2 links in the description that you should know about. First, there's a link to join my mailing list. On it, you will get exclusive discounts and offers. In fact, there's a special offer coming out this week that you don't want to miss. The second link is to join my Patreon. At the $5 per month level, you'll gain access to all of the source code for this course. Now we're getting close to the first goal amount as well. Once we hit that, I'll be giving my Patreon subscribers at all levels a behind the scenes tour of my office and my computer setup. Okay, so let's start planning out the next section of work for the TimCo Retail Manager. The overall goal of our application is to build a system for selling retail items. Our WPF front end is going to act like a cash register. So let's design out a simple cash register system that we can expand on in our future iterations. So what I have here is OneNote. If you're not familiar with OneNote, it's a great tool for brainstorming and just trying different things out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with some data. I personally like to see the data first just because it gives me a good feel for what forms I need to create and what the information's all about. This kind of feels to me like the heart of the application. It doesn't really matter what UI you have. The application isn't about the user interface, or it rarely is. There's probably an exception or two out there for, I don't know, some really weird edge cases. But the reality is for most applications, the UI is just there to serve up the data. Now, it may do so in a pretty way. It may do so in a way that's attractive or otherwise makes it more useful. But at the end of the day, that's what drives our application. So I'm going to plan out some data. So let's first off right away with an item to sell. So like so. And there's a font size change a little bit so we can see it better. So we have an item to sell. This is going to be one specific item. This is going to be our kind of our central piece of data because that's what the whole retail manager system is all about, is selling items. So this is probably going to be a table on its own. So let's think through what are the different pieces under this. So let's go over here and we'll put bullet points here and say what pieces do we want to sell, or what information about the item do we need to know? Well, we need to know the title, or the name, something like that. And maybe call it item name. And you probably need a description and a purchase price and a retail price. And the reason why I have both of those there is because if we buy something for $3 and we're selling it for $5, but let's just say we gave the person selling the opportunity to discount the item. Well, we'd want to know what's our rock bottom price that we'd actually start losing money on this item. So if we sold it for $2, we're losing $1 per item. That'd be probably a bad thing, although there are cases when you'd want to do that. But this gives us an indication of how much we purchased it for and then how much we're going to sell it for. And that way we also know the markup just by doing that calculation. Now, right now, before we go any further, I want to take a timeout here. Because you may be wondering, well, Tim, can I just skip this lesson? Because I just want to see how you build it, not work through the plan for it. And my answer is no. And here's the reason why. Planning is incredibly important. So if you are getting antsy, if you're trying to think about, skipping ahead or wanting to not really get into this that much, that's kind of a problem because you're not practicing a really important part of software development. If all you ever do is just start writing code, then what will happen is you will start writing code and you'll write yourself into a corner. And then you'll have to undo that. And that's where you create messy code and buggy code because you're trying to fix the thing you didn't think about. And so we're going to try and get ahead of that by planning things out. But you have to take this step and actually work on it. It's just like debugging. People come to me a lot of times and say, my application's not working, what should I do? And they want me to just fix it for them. And that's actually a great opportunity to debug. Because I really can't give you great examples for you to test out and work through your debugging skills. Debugging comes when you write an application that has a bug in it and you have then the opportunity to practice your debugging skills. Embrace that. In the same way here, you have an opportunity to plan, make sure you embrace it. Okay? Sorry, little soapbox. Let's get back to planning. So you have an item to sell that has an item name, a description, a purchase price, and a retail price. And the question is this comprehensive enough? And here's what I mean by that. So let's just say, I'm going to come over here and create a new field, and let's go ahead and change that font size as well because it defaults to 11. I want to change it to 18. All right, so let's just say that we purchased widgets. We purchased them for $1 a piece. And we purchased 100 of them. And we're going to sell them for $5. Cool. So you'd put the item name would be widget. The description would be this is a widget. The purchase price would be $1. Retail price would be $5. And then we'd have down here quantity and have 100. So if a person purchases one, the quantity would be 99 and they would purchase it for $5, we'd make a $4 profit. Cool. But let's just say we get down to, let's say 10 widgets left and we place a new order. Well, a new order for widgets, we place an order for 1,000 because they're going so great. And so now we buy them for 50 cents a piece because we bought 1,000 of them. And we're still selling them for $5. How do we record that in item to sell? Do we have a duplicate entry for widgets and a duplicate description because we have a different purchase price? Or do we try and do some kind of weird average in here? Or just change the purchase price to 50 cents even though we still have 10 widgets that we purchased for $1? How does that all work? And so that's where the system kind of breaks down. It's great if you're always buying it for a set price and that set price never changes. The reality is that set price is going to change. Doesn't matter what the price is, nothing stays the same. So if you're buying, gasoline, that's going to change. If you're buying loaves of bread, that's going to change. There's always something that's going to change in purchase price. Therefore, you're going to have a difference there and you have an issue. So let's do this. I'm going to keep this box here, but I'm going to say inventory. And I'll say item ID, purchase price, retail price, quantity. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to link this inventory to the item to sell. So we'll have an item name and description, but over here we'll have purchase price, retail price, and quantity. That way we can identify the kind of the parent or the item, so the widget, and yet we can say we bought 100 for $1 a piece, and we bought 1,000 for 50 cents a piece, and put both of those quantities in there. Now the only thing here that I think we should add is purchase date, because that way we go to say, all right, these are, by the way, let's go ahead and bullet point these. We say, okay, we're going to decrement the quantity by 1 for a widget. Which one do we decrement? And I would say the oldest one. Now, obviously, if we're talking about widgets in general, if there's a bin of 1,000 of them, we don't know for sure that the oldest one is the one that gets purchased first. But if we're talking about things like maybe food, we're putting it on the shelf, we put the oldest food in the front so it gets taken first. Or milk, same thing. You put the oldest milk in the front, that way it gets taken first. We rotate through our stock instead of having the newest milk in the front where the oldest milk in the back never gets pulled, and therefore it gets older and older and older and gets stale or spoiled. So we're going to assume just taking off the oldest stock, because it doesn't really matter for most things. And for when it does matter, it in fact will be true. You're pulling the oldest one first. Okay, so we have an item to sell. Let's call this sales item. Okay, so sales item, inventory, and then what we'll have to have then is a purchase. And let's, again, go ahead and change that font size. Actually, let's call it sale to be consistent. Sale. And a sale will be whenever someone makes a purchase of a number of items. So it's one item or multiple items. So we'll have the sale master and sale detail, or let's call it sale and then sale detail. So sale date, total. And actually before total, let's go ahead and put subtotal, tax, and then total. That way, if we do start collecting tax, that we have the ability to do so, and also have the ability to show that we collected a certain amount of tax for a given sale. So you have sale date, the subtotal of tax, and the total. I don't see a whole lot right now that we need to add to this, because we're talking about a cash register system right now. So the idea is we don't really know who the person is. They're just going to walk up and they're going to say, okay, I want to buy these 3 things. We're going to ring up the total, and then they're going to say, okay, it's $14.95. They give us $15. We give them 5 cents change, and that's all there is to it. So there is no knowing who the customer is, unless maybe we have a shopper card. We can add that later. That's not something we're going to do right now, but that would be something good to add. It's some kind of shopper card to identify the user so that we can put this on their account and say, okay, they did purchase this. And we don't have them logging in anyway. So we have the sale, and now we'll add over here the sale detail. And the sale detail will include, this would be multiple lines for one sale. So it's a one-to-many relationship. The sale ID references back to this kind of parent record. And then it would be the sales item. And then the purchased amount. Let's go to purchase price. So, for example, with our widget, where we're buying it for $1, we're selling it for $5. This could be, the ID of the widget, or this right here is the ID of the widget, and this would be the $5, but maybe it's on sale today for $4. And so you'd reference that and say, okay, it's actually, we bought it for $4. Even though the retail price is $5, we purchased it for $4. And that will allow us to look and see down the road if we are making wise choices with our sales or not. Things like, well, what's the actual average price a person's buying an item for? Not just what are we saying the price is. Okay? And that gives us a better idea of purchase price of the inventory item versus purchase price when the customer buys it. So if it really is $3 and $1, that's a little closer than the $5 and $1. So we have the item, we have a link to the sale, we have the item being purchased, and that's this right here. And then we have how much they purchased that particular item for, and also the quantity. So the purchase price, and this is going to be a question to ask, is do we want the purchase price to be the per item purchase price and then the quantity multiplies that, or do we want it to be the total for that row? And I think we want it to be the per item purchase price. That, because we can do the math on this. We can say, okay, if it's $3 and we bought 2 of them, the total for that row would be $6. So I don't think we need to have a total there and then do the division. I think I'd rather do multiplication here and say, what's the individual purchase price? Okay, so that seems like the basics of a sales system. So we have the sales item that's being purchased. We have an inventory of which sales items are in stock and how much we purchased them for and all the rest. And then we have the sale itself. So we say, okay, here's when it was purchased. Here's the total purchase price for everything they bought in their order. And then here's all the details for that order. So 3 of this, 2 of this, and 1 of that. Okay. So I think that's the basics of the cash register systems design. But I think it's one more table at least that we have to think through because we haven't yet addressed it in building our application. And that is the person that is running the cash register. This isn't a self-service system yet. It's still just a cashier runs it and puts in the information. So we have to have some way of knowing who the cashier is so that we know who made purchases and all the rest. And in fact, for the sale, we should have the cashier ID. So we know who the cashier was that processed this sale. So let's design a really simple little user table. And this is just something to kind of give us more information about who the cashier is. So this would be the user table. And this would have first name, last name, email address, and user ID. And that'd be it. Okay. So this is who's going to log into the system. We will have some authentication here and say that only a cashier can log into the WPF system right now. And that when they do, we'll know their first name, their last name, their email address. Okay, so that's the information we're going to know. And then cashiers can perform sales, and that's about it. Okay, so this right here is the basics of our data for our system. Now you may look at this and go, yeah, there's so much we have to do yet. And that is true. because we don't have things like returns. And that's just not going to wiggle around for me like I want. We don't have returns. We don't have reports. We have very basic information about just about everything. We don't have pictures for the items. It's kind of limited, and that's okay, because that's just not what we need right now. We just need to get started with something. And this is where one term for is minimum viable product. Another is that we're just doing a sprint if we're in the agile methodology. But essentially what we're doing is we're trying to get something into the hands of users that they can actually use. And we need to get there as soon as possible. The previous kind of mindset behind applications, and it's still pretty prevalent, is the idea of what's called waterfall. And the idea is that you map out the entire application. And you spend all this time up front, you map it all out, you do all this design work and all the rest. And then after, let's just say, in a 1-year project, you may do between 3 and 4 months of design work. Then you start building your application. Your application takes a good 6 to 8 months to build. So now you're 9, 10 months into this project before you have your first thing to show the users. But when you show it to them, they'll have all the stuff they need. And 10 months goes by and it probably slips to 11 or 12, because that's what happens with large projects like that, is it's hard to estimate and it's hard to stay on track. But let's just say you get it out in, say, 11 months. And you get it out in 11 months and the users go, this is awful. It's hard to use. It doesn't, account for X, Y, and Z, and so on. And so he comes back and says, okay, well, we need to make some major modifications to this system. And so you go through that design process again, and you spend another month trying to overhaul the system that's never actually been used for more than testing. And you're already doing an overhaul, and you make changes. And remember I said that when you work yourself into a corner and then try and back out and make changes, that's when you introduce bugs? Well, that's what happens here, is you introduce bugs because you're trying to rip out systems or make systems do something you did not originally intend for them to do. And so now you've got these bugs in the system you have to deal with, and you have a system that's not doing what it's designed to do, but it's a little closer to what the user wants, and it's over budget and it's over time, and people are unhappy, and you have this massive product that no one's really used. We're now in the 1.5 to 2 year time frame. That's what happens with waterfall projects, at least to any scale. Okay, so the idea behind Agile that came out is the idea that you do these small little iterations. And the real point behind it, and we're not going to go full Agile and the whole Scrum or anything else like that, but what we're going to be doing is kind of along those lines, because the idea behind it is that you do a little bit of work and you give it to the user. Because if the user goes, no, that's not what I want, you're changing a little bit of work. You're not changing months of work. It's also a lot easier to adjust on the fly, because maybe you do a little bit of work and the user goes, that's great, I'm not using this piece that you're looking at doing next. I'm not really seeing a need to have that piece, but I really want this piece that you hadn't even thought about yet. And you can go, sure, we can do that, because we don't have to do the piece that we thought we needed to do next, but that you say you really don't need. And so that's where we can really adjust on the fly and move quickly. And that's what we're doing here. We spent very, very little time planning our first kind of phase or first iteration of this project, because we said, well, we need to know we have to have a WPF front end, a web API, a SQL database. And so let's kind of scaffold those 3 things up. And we did that. And so that was kind of our first iteration is, yes, we have something running. We can't give it to the user yet because there's nothing to really see, but we did kind of demo the fact that it all worked. And now this is our opportunity to get something into the hands of the user and at the same time get something in the hands of the user that is the most important piece. Now, the other part of this is something that a lot of users overlook. And that's why the term minimum viable product really came out of. And that's the idea that you kind of strip away all the things that would be nice and get to the core of your product and get that in the hands of your users. And the reason why is because if the core of your product isn't good, there's no use spending all that time putting nice shine and polish on it. You need to make sure that you get the core of your product right. And that's what we're going to try to do here. The core of our product is selling items. Everything else is really on the peripheral, whether it's giving the users a web interface to buy stuff on their own, or having a touchscreen product that allows for self-service in the store, or machine-to-machine API calls, and that kind of stuff. That's all peripheral. The core of our application is selling items to users. That's what this is. And so that's what we're going to do, just the core. And then we'll keep expanding and adding features as we go and see how it works. And that will allow us to adjust and change over time. All right, so let's go ahead and start drawing out our front end. And I apologize in advance, I am not good at drawing, especially not when I'm using my mouse. I don't have one of those drawing tablets, and I've not really gotten good at those anyways. But I don't have one of those drawing tablets to help aid me here. But I'm going to give it a shot here. We're going to start off with square boxes or rectangular boxes. That'll help. So this is going to be my first user interface. And we're going to call this our, let's change that font size again. We'll call this our sales screen. Now, if it actually is or not, if we want to change that later to something a little more descriptive, that's cool. It's just more the idea of having a name for it so that we know what the purpose behind it is. So let's go here. I've got my pen. And the thought I have here is that we'll have this list right here. And it will be a list box. And this will be our list of items. Okay. So you select an item in the list box, and then we'll have here a quantity. So I have a little drop down or an arrow key or something like that that indicates that we can set the quantity. Maybe it's an arrow, probably a plus, minus, but there we go. So they'll indicate how many of the selected item we want. And then we'll have a button here that says, well, let's say add to cart. Running out of room here, aren't I? Oop, I did it. Cart. So add to cart there. And then we'll have this right here, which is our cart. And that's just a list of all the items. So there's our cart. And then we'll have down here our, let's just put a dollar sign here, a couple of them. 3 actually. And then the 3 will have subtotal, we'll have tax, and we'll have total. We can even do this in real time. That way, as we're adding to things to the cart, that we can know, okay, this is how much it's going to cost. All right. Now, notice we don't have in here the ability yet for a scanner. And that's one of the things that would probably come down the road. This first iteration is going to be a manual system where they say, okay, this is what you got, and they select it and they add it to the cart and do so manually. I think down the road, a really good addition will be to have a barcode scanner. And so we have a totally different page that would be just a cart and these $3 signs. And you would scan an item and it would read it into a field. It would populate the information and then it'd put it in the cart. And then it would do the quantities just by scanning it twice. Okay. So for now, though, this is a manual system. That's okay. This is, again, minimum viable product. Okay. And then we'll have down here a buy button. And it should tell us some information, probably over here, about, how much it is, and maybe not even that. So maybe let's get rid of that. So if we hit the buy button, and at that point, either we have to just say they gave us the information, gave us the money, or we have to have some kind of system where it says, okay, you gave me $20 and it was $18.50. I give you $1.25 back, or something of that nature. So I think for now, what we'll do is we'll just have the buy button, and we'll say that the transaction goes through just as it is. I think the next iteration, one of the next iterations, would be to then have a pop-up or something here when you hit buy that allows you to choose cash, check, or credit card. And then based upon that option, it allows you to either put in how much cash they gave you, or allows you to either take the check or the credit card. So, but for now, I think that will work. And that's really all there is for the sales screen. The only other screen that I see that we really need in the front is our login screen, and that's it. So let's go ahead and add that as well. That's a pretty simple screen. Now, if we come up here, let's grab this, copy and paste it, bring it down here. I'm going to call this the login screen. And let's move it up a little bit. Okay, so in here, we just need to have maybe our logo, which, it's mountains with the birds in the sky, something like that. Maybe a sun, because I'm in 3rd grade, and that's my artist skills. Okay, and then we're going to have our username and our password and our login button. All right, that's pretty much it. So your login button, and let's just do username and password. Okay, so there's our 2 screens we have to create. There's our data we have to create. The one thing we're missing in the middle is our API. So we have to develop our API layer to match these 2 up. Now, designing that it's tricky how you want to do this. So in one way, the API is actually, I moved that, didn't I? Sorry about that. I thought I copied this. There we go. So this is the sales screen. All right, sorry. Okay, so the API in one way is a user interface, because it really is the endpoint where we interact and get information. Now, by we, I mean really it's computer to computer. It's not often that a user will directly use the API. In fact, it probably should be never. But it really is kind of a user interface. So in some ways, we should probably just design it over here. But I find that with this information we have on the screen, that it becomes kind of obvious what things I need where. So instead of trying to design it out on paper, what I'm going to do is I'm going to build these tables, and I'm going to build these data models, and then I'm also going to build this user interface. And as we build this user interface, we'll probably start a login screen since that's the one that comes first. When we build this, I'm going to know what I need for my API. And in fact, I'll probably need nothing here because this is just a login. So when it logs in, it's going to say, yes, you're approved, or no, you're not. But it is going to grab this user information. Now, we have no place to put this in right now. There's no UI for it. Not a problem. We're going to enter it manually because that's not the main point of our application. And we could spend time creating nice user interfaces for it. But the reality is we have the API. And we even have lower down in that, we have the SQL Server Management Studio or SQL Server Data Tools. We can go right in and enter this data directly. So we're not going to worry about it now. But we will get information back on this call. So we need to have some API that at least returns this information when you log in. Now, when we get to this screen, we're going to need to have a list of all of our sales items that are in stock. Okay, so we need to have that list here. Well, that's an API call. And then when we add things to the cart, which we can do in the front end without any calls to the API, and we say we want to make a purchase, it's got to take that information in and enter it in as a sale and process it through. So that information will need to get sent back to the API. Again, it's an endpoint call. But we don't have a whole list of, okay, give me, show me all the sales items, add a sales item, show me one specific sales item. We don't have all those endpoints. And we could design them all, but I find that doing so, you waste time when you don't really need to have all those endpoints now. Now, one final note before we're done here, and that is that the user table, for right now, we just have people who are authorized to be cashiers. However, we are going to put authorizations on these routes that allow you to make purchases. We're going to say that only a cashier can make that purchase or authorize that purchase. And so we are going to have some limitations there and some groupings to say that this user is a cashier. So we will get into some details there in the API that you might not have noticed on first glance. So we'll get a little bit deeper in the authentication system and saying that it's not just anyone who's authorized, but it's cashiers who are authorized. So we'll get into that as well. But for right now, I think this is a good set of changes to make to our application to get something running and at the same time not be a very, very large application. If we were doing this at our job where it was 8 hours a day, we could probably do this in a couple of days. Now, it may take us a little longer than that, a little longer than a couple of weeks to do this application on YouTube, but it won't be a months long project. We'll just do it in a few weeks. It's all it'll really take. Okay. So for now, that's it. One question I have for you that I'd like to know is, what do you want to see after this? Okay. So one of the things that, and as we go, I'll keep asking this question. I want to get your feedback on this. Is what is the next step that you want to see us take? Is it to kind of flesh out the user system? So we have, say, a place for the user to enter their first name and last name or modify it. Do you want to see a credit card type system where we're obviously not going to actually process credit cards, but where the buy button doesn't just say buy, but it has things like, okay, if you gave me cash, here's the change to return, and so on. Do you want to see a barcode system in here? What do you want to see as the next step, or what do you think the next logical step should be in this application? Okay, so leave that in the comments below. Let me know, and I'll kind of tally up what people think, and I'll get a kind of general feel for what the next step might be. Okay, now coming up next, and this is one of the things that's been requested, is we get a little bit more of a future look at what the next steps are going to be, is we're going to go through and create these tables in SQL. So that's next. And after that, we will look at creating our login screen and having it talk to the API. Now, that might be 2 videos, we'll see, but that's kind of the next bit. And then after that, we'll create our sales screen. And then after that, we'll create the API that kind of connects our data to our sales screen. And we'll kind of go back and forth a little bit there as we create the APIs, wire them up, and then create more and wire them up as well. In there somewhere will be where we actually create probably at least one, probably 2 class libraries. Now, class libraries, we can share our code between our different projects, but we won't necessarily share our class libraries here, or not all of them. So for example, the API will have a data access layer that can talk directly to SQL. We probably won't share that library with our WPF application because it does not talk directly to any database. It talks to the API. The API is the one that talks to the database. So there'll be some separation there. But for next week, what we'll do is we'll jump right into creating these and then go from there. Okay? So it's kind of a look ahead at what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. But for right now, it's just tackle these next, tackle the database. Okay? So don't forget to leave that comment down below letting me know what you think the next step after this is going to or should be. Okay? Thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.